Be me. I was not a difficult child. That's the official lie adults tell when they don't know what to do with a girl like me. What I actually was? Loud, fast, easy to piss off, very hard to embarrass in public. And unfortunately for half the boys at school, I had a strong moral code and decent aim. I didn't wake up every morning planning violence. Usually. But if some mouth-breathing idiot thought it was funny to snap a girl's bra strap, block a hallway, make a joke about her body, or act like, relax, it's just a joke, was a magical legal defense? Yeah. Sometimes he got introduced to the nearest locker. I'm not saying I was right. The thing about school is that boys get away with a lot as long as they do it smiling. Teachers call it teasing. Parents call it roughhousing. Principals call it a misunderstanding between students. Girls call it what it is, annoying at best, humiliating at worst. I noticed that early, maybe too early. Maybe that's why I was always angry. I laughed a lot, I had friends. I cut class exactly enough to be interesting and not enough to get expelled. I dyed my hair because if people were already going to look at me, they could at least do it correctly. But there was always this live wire in me, this immediate, stupid, explosive thing. The second I saw some guy messing with a girl who clearly didn't want the attention, something in my brain went, nope, not today. And then suddenly I was in the middle of it, again. The first time my parents got called in, I was 13. A boy in my class had spent a week pulling on this quiet girl's backpack straps and asking if she was mute or just ugly. She kept saying nothing. That was what finally got to me, because I could tell she'd already learned the lesson girls get taught way too early. If you don't react, maybe they'll stop. They never stop. So on Friday, when he did it again, I turned around and shoved him so hard he sat down on the floor by accident. Everyone went quiet. The girl stared at me like I'd pulled a knife. The boy stood up bright red and said, "What the hell is wrong with you?" And I said, "A lot, apparently." Then he tried to grab my arm, and I punched him in the stomach. Not the face. I wasn't trying to start a blood feud. Just enough to fold him like a cheap chair. That was how my parents ended up in the principal's office, listening to the words aggressive conduct, while I sat there in my school uniform, arms crossed, pretending I didn't care. I did care. That was the worst part. It wasn't fun sitting there while adults talked around me like I was a weather event. It wasn't fun watching my mother pinch the bridge of her nose while my father sat stiff in his chair, with that deeply disappointed silence that somehow hurt more than yelling ever could. The principal said things like, "Lena is bright but reactive. She has trouble regulating conflict. She escalates situations physically." I remember thinking, maybe if literally anyone else regulated the conflict first, I wouldn't have to. I did not say that out loud. I was trying to be on my best behavior, which, for me, mostly meant only glaring. My parents were better than I deserved. That's probably not the healthiest way to phrase it, but it's true. They were not the kind of parents who thought their child was an angel when she clearly wasn't. But they also weren't the kind who treated me like I was broken just because I was hard to manage. On the drive home, no one talked for a while. Then my mother said, "Did he touch her again after she told him to stop?" I looked out the window and muttered, "Yeah." My father, hands tight on the steering wheel, said, "That doesn't mean you get to hit people." I stared at my knees. I know. And I did know. That was the problem. I always knew after. Then my mother asked, softer, "Did you think anyone else was going to help her?" I said nothing. My father sighed. "Lena," he said, "wanting to protect someone is not the same thing as knowing how." That one stuck, because it was true. I wanted to protect girls, I wanted to stop things before they turned ugly. I wanted to be the wall things hit instead of them. But my methods? Very mixed reviews. When we got home, I went to my room and sat on the floor with my back against the bed, feeling hot all over with the kind of shame I hated most, the kind that makes you feel 12 and stupid, even when you know why you did what you did. I hated that my parents had to leave work for me. I hated that teachers looked at me like I was one bad day away from becoming a headline. I hated that, deep down, I knew I wasn't helping as much as I imagined. But I never showed that part. Not even to my parents, really. I hid it the only way I knew how. Attitude. If I was sarcastic enough, maybe no one would notice I felt bad. If I rolled my eyes hard enough, maybe I wouldn't have to admit I was embarrassed. If I acted like being called a lot was a compliment, maybe it would stop stinging. It never really did. By 15, I had a reputation. Not slutty, not sweet, not mysterious, worse. Difficult. Teachers warned substitute teachers about me. Boys talked tough around me and then suddenly remembered urgent appointments when I stood up too fast. Girls mostly liked me, which I considered my highest civic achievement. I got called a bitch at least twice a month, usually by boys who had just said something disgusting and were deeply offended to be told so. Once, a guy in the hallway looked me dead in the eye and said, "You only hate men because you can't get one." I laughed so hard I nearly choked. Then I told him, "No, I hate men because apparently they can get you." He did not enjoy that. There was almost another meeting with the principal. I became very good at pretending none of it touched me. The weird thing is, my parents always seemed to understand more than I wanted them to. One evening, after another stupid fight at school, this time because I'd shoved a guy into a trash can for making comments about a girl's chest during gym, my father knocked on my bedroom door. I expected a lecture. Instead, he came in, leaned against the frame, and said, "You know you can't keep solving everything with your fists." I rolled my eyes. There goes my whole problem-solving framework. He ignored that. "Your mother says you only do it when someone else gets targeted." I shrugged. Maybe. He studied me for a second. Then he said, "That makes you reckless, not cruel." I looked up. He didn't say things like that lightly. And somehow that made it worse, because it meant he saw me. "Wow," I said. "That almost sounded nice." My father snorted once, which, from him, was basically open affection. Then he said, "You should still stop hitting people." "I'll consider it." "You won't." "No." He nodded like this confirmed his worldview. Then, on his way out, he said something that stayed with me for years. "Don't be ashamed of having a strong instinct to protect people. Just try to become someone who protects them better." The door closed, and I sat there in the quiet thinking, oh, that was somehow so much worse than punishment. Because punishment I could fight. Understanding got under the armor. I didn't become gentler after that. Not immediately. I still snapped, still fought, but something shifted. I started noticing the girls I defended more clearly, how often they looked relieved, not impressed, how often they thanked me in quiet voices after, how often they were less shocked by the boys than by the fact that anyone stepped in. By 16, I had gone from that loud girl to that loud girl who might bite. But the more I paid attention, the more certain I became that boys were just exhausting. Even the ones who liked me were exhausting, especially the ones who liked me actually, because they never liked me correctly. One guy told me, "You'd be really hot if you smiled more and threatened me less." I told him, "You'd be really tolerable if you disappeared." he did not appreciate my honesty. Tragic. By the end of school, I had developed a rule. Girls were safer. Girls didn't make me feel like I had to prepare for impact every time I walked into a room. That didn't mean I fully understood myself yet. It just meant one category of people kept making my skin crawl, and another didn't. And once I noticed that, I couldn't unnotice it. I didn't know where it would lead. I met Diana when I was 18, and already fully convinced I did not need calm people in my life. Calm people usually came with opinions, with, "Have you tried not reacting?" Diana was calm too, but different. I noticed her before we actually met. She moved through campus. She always looked put together. The first time I really saw her, she was standing outside one of the academic buildings, holding a stack of papers, while some guy talked at her like he'd mistaken her for free customer service. She wasn't smiling. That caught my attention, because girls like Diana, pretty, quiet, obviously reliable, usually got forced into polite faces by men like him. But she just stood there, looking faintly exhausted, like she was waiting for him to become less of a problem. A week later, I intentionally bumped into her in the hallway and helped her pick up the papers. I introduced myself first. "Lena." "Diana," she said. She looked like her name should be spoken over candlelight with a string quartet in the background. I looked like I should be banned from at least one student committee. A little too aware of how pretty her mouth was when she said my name. Absolutely. At first, I did what I always did when I liked someone. I became a problem. I started showing up where she was. Not stalking, strategic appearing. I accidentally ran into her outside class. I took the long way to the library because she studied there. I discovered, to my outrage, that she was just as good-looking while carrying coffee as she was while quietly dismantling my piece. The thing is, Diana never reacted to me the way other people did. She didn't flinch, didn't brace, didn't look at me like I was one sentence away from ruining her day. She listened. That made me feral. One afternoon, I sat across from her in the cafeteria while she ate salad, like someone in an advertisement for stability. I was halfway through a rant about a professor who thought women's voices were decorative when I noticed she was watching me. Actually watching. "What?" I asked. She blinked once. "You care very loudly." I leaned back in my chair. That's one way to say I'm right. Her mouth twitched. "No," she said softly. "It's one way to say you mean things." That should not have done what it did to me. But I felt it anyway. That little dangerous click in my chest. Because people were used to describing me as difficult. Diana's version was sincere. I did not recover from that in a dignified way. I pointed my fork at her and said, "You are deeply suspicious." She nodded. "I get that a lot." "No, you don't." "Not from you, no." I had to look away after that because, once again, my body was behaving like it had never seen a beautiful woman be calm and funny at the same time. Rude. The real problem started when I realized I liked being around her, even when nothing interesting was happening. That was new. I had crushes before, fast ones. This wasn't fun. This was me wanting to hear what she thought about things, wanting to know if she'd eaten lunch, wanting to make her laugh when she looked tired, wanting to protect her, which was inconvenient because she was very clearly capable of taking care of herself. I flirted more, got louder, started showing up with coffee I pretended I accidentally bought twice, argued with her on purpose just to keep her looking at me. Diana noticed. One evening we were walking back from campus together, and I asked about us as a future together to clarify the situation between us. She agreed. I started touching her more. Her wrist when I was trying to get her attention, her shoulder when I slipped past her in a crowded hallway, her hand once, briefly, when she looked tired and I wanted to anchor her to something warm. Every time, she let me. And then she kissed me. Finally. I forgot every language. When she pulled back, I was still staring at her like an idiot. She looked almost embarrassed, which on her was devastating. I've wanted to do that for some time, she admitted. I put a hand over my heart. Oh, thank God. I was becoming unbearable. Her mouth twitched. You were already unbearable. Fair. That was our beginning. Being her girlfriend was weirdly easy after that. Not because relationships are easy, because liking Diana was. Loving her was. She fit into my life like she'd always had a shape there, waiting for her. She started sleeping over more, started leaving little things behind, started telling me when she was overwhelmed instead of pretending she was fine. And I, somehow, miraculously, didn't screw it up. One night, she was lying with her head in my lap while I played with a strand of her hair, and she said, "You know what I like about you?" I smirked. "There's too much to choose from, I know." She ignored that. "You never make me feel like I have to earn softness." That shut me up immediately. I looked down at her. Her eyes were half closed, her face unguarded, and I thought, oh, this is serious. So I bent down, kissed her forehead, and said the most honest thing I had. "You don't. Not with me." She smiled, small, sleepy, certain. And just like that, I knew I was done. Not flirt done, not crush done, future done. Diana wasn't just someone I loved. She was home, starting early. I didn't know yet that one day we'd have an apartment together, a cat with criminal energy, and eventually, one suspiciously average man who would ruin all my lesbian certainty in the most inconvenient way possible.
They said I wasn't difficult. That's the grown-up version of a lie. I was loud, fast, hard to shame, with a short fuse and decent aim. Boys got away with murder if they did it with a grin. Teachers called it teasing, girls just called it what it is. So if some idiot blocked a hallway or snapped a bra strap just for fun, yeah, maybe I introduced a shoulder to a locker in the run. And I know, I made it worse sometimes, but no one ever stepped in till I crossed the line. I say mean things loudly when the room gets ugly, when the boys act stupid and call it funny. Maybe I'm a problem, maybe I'm too much, but I was never sorry for who I had to shove. And you looked at me like loud wasn't crazy, like fire could mean holy, not just dangerous. Baby, I say mean things loudly, but you heard something true. Under all the wreckage, I was trying to get to you. By 15, I had a label. Difficult bitch, too intense. Funny how the worst men panic when a girl gets self-defense. Even the ones who like me all the wrong ways. Smile more, threaten less, act pretty, stay in place. Then I saw you on the campus steps, holding papers, looking tired. Some guy talked to you forever. You looked 1 second from a fire. I bumped your shoulder in the hallway, helped you pick your whole life up. You said Diana like a prayer, and I forgot off too. Didn't flinch, you did embrace. You watched me like I meant what I said. I say mean things loudly when the room gets ugly, when the boys act stupid and call it funny. Maybe I'm a problem, maybe I'm too much, but I was never sorry for who I had to shove. Then you looked at me like loud wasn't crazy, like fire could mean holy, not just dangerous. Baby, I say mean things loudly, but you heard something true. Under all the wreckage, I was trying to get to you. worry, touching your wrist to get your eyes. Walking home, the air went quiet. You kissed me and I lost my mind. You said you'd wanted that for some time. I said thank God I was getting worse. You called me unbearable, yeah, but you said it first. Now your head is in my lap and your voice gets soft. And now you said I never made you earn the parts of you that wanted light. And God, no one ever told me love could feel this easy. No blood, no bruises, just you seeing me completely. I say mean things loudly, but I hold you gently. You make all my damage feel less heavy. Maybe I'm a problem, maybe I'm still too much. But with you, I don't feel punished for the way I love. You looked at me like loud was a language, like all my sharp edges still deserve tenderness. I say mean things loudly, but you knew what to do. You found the girl inside the riot and she came home to you. They called me difficult, you called me sincere. That's how I knew you were getting dangerous here. They heard a warning, you heard a pulse. I say mean things loudly, but I love you soft.